So the basic problem is you have a whole chart of numbers and you're trying to figure out how to multiply them, and it's not completely obvious at first exactly how to do it. And there's a few equivalent ways of defining it, but okay, so let's just take a simple example. So I'm just going to multiply matrices that are square and just have zeros and ones and show you how to do it. Okay, let's just, put, okay. So, I'm multiplying these matrices. I hope this doesn't come out backwards in the video. If it does, I don't have a solution to that. I'm multiplying this one by this one. And, okay, so, here's the idea. In order to figure out what an entry in the resultant matrix is, you take that row in the first matrix and that column in the second, and there's no formula to there's no logical reason that you take a row and then a column and not a column and then a row. You just have to sort of get used to that fact. But otherwise, it's pretty simple. So we are looking for the product. And so, see, I drew a square around that entry. And so we want to know what that is. Now, we take the row of the first one, the appropriate row, which is that first row, and that column of the second one. And so what we get is 1 times 0 plus 1 times 1. Right, 1 times 0 plus 1 times 1. Because the first entry, you multiply with the first entry, and then you add to that the product of the second entry with the second entry. You might have seen the dot product. This is a dot product. If you haven't seen it, then well, it's you multiply the appropriate component, the first component with the first one, and then you add it to the second component times the second one, etc. So, well, that's 0 plus 1, so that's 1. So I'm going to actually erase my first matrix. I didn't like that box I drew in it. But now we have our first entry. Our first entry is 1. And we take our second one. So I'm going to look at this entry right under it. So I take, again, the first row, but this time dotted with the second column. Sorry. No, not the first row. This time I take the second row and I dot it with the first column, right? Because this is the second row, it's the bottom row, it's this row with that column. And that sort of if you see where the column and the row intersect, that's the place in the matrix that this new entry is in. And you could see that again. This time it's 0 times 0 plus 1 times 1. Which is also 1. So now I'm just gonna fill in the entries. I'm gonna write down the equation. I'm gonna fill in the entries. I'll show you a picture of it, and you'll able to work it out. And this is in general how matrix multiplication works. This should work. I mean, it's really just the algorithm makes sense because it's where the row and column meet. But beyond that, it's memorizing that it's the row of the first one and the column of the second one, and that's how you matrix multiply. And I mean, if you're taking linear algebra or something that uses it, you're gonna have to figure out how to matrix multiply figure. Okay, so again, I'm reading off my paper. I'm just gonna do this out loud. So for the second column, I first take the first row, dot the second column. But if you paid attention to that matrix, the second column is the same as the first one, so it's really the same thing again twice for the top and bottom entry, because I just happen to have drawn my matrix with the second matrix having the same two columns, and so what you get is the matrix of all ones. So that's the product. These are the calculations of the individual entries, and that's how you matrix multiply.